the Wolves need lower usage type role players, and that's what I think the direction we're going is both of these guys, Kessler and Moore, are kind of lower, or I should say higher floor, lower ceiling type guys where they're going to play a role.
On the field, in the broadcast booth, Ron Johnson is Minnesota sports. One-of-a-kind opinions, big-name guests, the teams you care about every day. It's the Ron Johnson Show, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Ron Johnson Show, and I am your host, Ron Johnson. We're going to bring my producer in at some point. Sam Ekstrom is his name. Basketball is his game. Maybe. Hating on Kirk Cousins is kind of his game, but we'll save that for a different day. But draft, NBA, last night, Timberwolves looked a little Vikings-ish. There was some trades. It was some trades to the point where I thought Jake LaRavia, I don't even know how to say his name, LaRavia, what is it? Jake LaRavia. I'm going to go with that. I thought he was a Timberwolf. I liked the pick, and then I realized, you know what? They traded with Memphis. But here's who they got. Kessler, Walker Kessler out of Auburn, 7'1". He played with the other top Auburn pick. And then they also went and got Wendell Moore Jr. I really like that pick. I watched a lot of Duke basketball. Why? Because of Pablo Banchero. I don't know where Coach K found this kid, but Coach K landed the #1 draft pick in the NBA. If there was any team that he could go to, and if there was any player that they should have gotten over Chet Holmgren, the Orlando Magic, I'm okay with Pablo Banchero because after that Final Four run, I said he was the best player in college basketball, and there he is. But as I bring Sam in, before we jump into this Timberwolves reaction and what I think, and what does Sam think, we have a word from our sponsors.
BetOnline.net is your #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering info, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net, fastest and easiest way to check in on your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Travelers Championship this weekend. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
You look at what the Timberwolves got, and here's my take. You look at Cat, the big center, 7'1" guy. He's definitely not going to take Cat. He's not better than Cat. This is what I think, though. If you want to go him at center, Cat at the 4, you have a really big lineup, and then you go 2 6'5" slashers and Wendell Moore Jr. with Anthony Edwards, and then you throw D'Angelo Russell. What do you get out of that? Well, you got Wendell Moore, who played forward in college, can guard anybody on the court that's about 6'9" down to 6 feet. I mean, if you watch Duke basketball, between him and Paolo Banchero, they had a really good season. They just could not get it done in the end. But Wendell Moore Jr. is a guy that can will his team. He's a slasher. He's not afraid to finish with the opposite hand. He uses the rim as another kind of post where he goes under the rim and uses that to stop the shot blocker from getting it, and he kind of can cradle it under. I mean, that North Carolina game, he kind of came back to life, willed them back into the game, has a really nice step back 3 at the top of the key. He's a guy that can bring the ball up the court. So if you put him at the point, because in today's basketball, you don't really need a true point guard anymore. If you just have a bunch of guys on the court that are going to play well together. If you go Wendell Moore Jr. at the point, you go Anthony Edwards at the 2, and then you now have some other pieces in there like Cat at the 5. Now you have a different type of lineup. You got a 6'2", 6'5" guards, where if you're playing a team with a smaller guard, post them up. I mean, you got to use that to your advantage. That's what teams do to Steph Curry. When Steph Curry's on somebody, if they have a bigger body on them, they put them in the post. That's what you can get. Not to say they're going to beat the Golden State Warriors, but I like that pick. There's one thing, though, that I was a little bit thrown off with. When you get 2 picks, I look at the Warriors, for instance. They got a really nice pick. Kid, he went and played for his dad at a small school.
Patrick Baldwin.
And this is the thing about him. He's long, 6'10", was the number. He was like top 5 recruit coming out of high school, but, got injured. Would have been a lottery pick after his freshman year, and then gets injured. And so you think about that. That's going to be probably one of those picks we look back on is like, man, I can't believe everybody passed up on this guy, and the Warriors found a way to get him. Another pick that I like was the Jovic kid, Nikola Jovic. When you watch his tape, I mean, you talked about earlier yesterday, you talked about the movie with Anthony Edwards.
Hustle.
And was it Bo? What was his name?
Bo Cruz.
Bo Cruz. That kid reminds me of him. Like when you look at his game, his ability to shoot, 6'11". I mean, has a long wingspan as well. Like the kid plays fast. Like you watch his, not his highlights of the draft. You go watch some because his games are loaded. That's another one. I'm like, man, why did the Timberwolves get him? Like you have 2 picks. You don't need the 7'1" bruiser. Go get you a 6'10" swing guy. You're in the West. I mean, unless you're truly going to put this guy in the game to go against some of these bigs, no, let Karl-Anthony Towns deal with the Joker, and then you bring in not baby Joker, but you call this kid like cousin Joker, whatever you want to call him. Kid's nice. Kid can shoot 6'10", 6'11", and can knock down the 3. Like, I don't understand why people continue to pass up on these guys, and then we're going to look back and say, man, I wish the Timberwolves had got Nikola Jovic. Like, this kid's good. Because you already have Anthony Edwards, you have Karl-Anthony Towns, you could have got Wendell Moore Jr., and then you could have got Jovic. Like, that's who I would have gotten. Nothing against Kessler. We'll see. Maybe he is the answer down in the post, but that's kind of my thoughts.
That's interesting because now someone can correct me on Twitter if I'm wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that Tim Connolly, the new president of the Wolves, is the same guy that drafted Jokic in Denver, or at least had a big part in that draft. So if anybody understands the value of like a Serbian big man, it's Tim Connolly.
Yeah.
So that is interesting. That's a good point, Ron.
And he was picked right after.
Yeah. Yep. Is this the next Giannis? Is it the next Curry? Is it the next Clay for the Wolves? But I do enjoy both of these picks for the following reason. I could see them both having a role this year. And I think in a year where the Wolves really have to win, I mean, this is a winning expectation this year for sure, probably better than a 7 seed, maybe even home court advantage is the expectation this year. I could see Walker Kessler having a very nice niche coming off the bench, providing defense, which this team is constantly looking for, providing rebounding, and just providing front court depth. And you don't need to be super refined when you're 7'1", and he was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, even if he can't shoot threes yet, he's on 20% at that. It's okay. Like, I know we all expect big guys to shoot now, but he might be very, very effective in the paint. So I think there's a niche for him. And Wendell Moore, I mean, this isn't some young, raw 18-year-old. He played 3 years at Duke in the ACC, and he, at times, you know, with Ben Caro, carried that Duke team to the Final Four. So this is not a young guy with, like, we're hoping that he develops in a couple of years. I think he might be ready to contribute this year in one of those 3-and-D kind of roles. So I like that these guys can probably have an impact right away and help these Wolves this year win and give them some of the depth they were looking for.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, that's where I really like the Wendell Moore, because Duke players, like me, even down to Tyus Jones, they seem to be very NBA ready when they come to the NBA. Like, they seem to be pro ready. They seem to have a sense of, you know, plus minus. Like, you look at Tyus Jones, you look at his brother Trey Jones. Like, they have a really good plus minus type of game. You go back to, you know, I mean, not to say Kyrie, he wasn't there that long, but a lot of Duke players, when you're around Coach K even for a second, it seems like it rubs off when they get there, because Coach K has that old school USA basketball, you know, mindset of, I got to get these guys ready to be pros. But again, I do like the defensive side of that pick with Kessler, and I do like the fact that he's 7'1". You did bring up a good point of depth. That was kind of the thing when Cat went to the bench. We were wondering who's going to be that next guy. When Cat gets in, almost in foul, like first, second foul, maybe you bring him in, you leave Cat in at the 4, and now you can put him inside to deal with some of the slashing guards, to deal with some of the protection, you know, getting blocks, allowing Cat to stretch out and truly be a shooting 4 like he wants to be. So, yeah, so I could see him coming to contribute. When I saw those highlights of Jovic, I'm like, oh, man, like, why not? The kid is fast. He's a slasher. He can shoot. Like, the Heat are ready. The Heat went and got him. And you look at the Celtics. The Celtics were in the finals, and they're still talking about, we need points. And who are they looking at trading for? Bradley Beal. All of a sudden, they want to get rid of Marcus Smart and bring in Bradley Beal. Like, teams are always trying to find a way to put more points on the board. Why not go get a Nikola Jovic? He's points. He's points with a team that he can be your 3 at 6'11". He can be your true 3 at 6'11". Anthony Edwards at the 2. D'Angelo Russell at the 1. Karl-Anthony Towns at the 4 or the 5. And then you go find you a 4. Or Wendell Moore Jr. in there. Wendell Moore Jr. at the 2. Anthony Edwards at the 3. Jovic at the 4. Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5. Like, that's a nice death lineup. That's a bunch of shooters. That's 5 people that can put the ball in the hole. Like, you can spread teams out like the Warriors. That's just my take, though. I mean, hey, it might not happen that way. The Bears even over. He's like, man, look, I'm done. Like, I had too many beers tonight. I'm done. But up next, we're going to talk to Ben Beecken. He's Locked On Sports, NBA draft analyst for the Wolves. He talks a lot of basketball. We've had him on the show before. He's going to give us his thoughts on the Timberwolves. Is this the pieces of the puzzle that will help them be maybe a 5 seed or a 4 seed? Because they were right there, but certain games they couldn't finish. And we'll be back after this. As we bring Ben Beecken in. Ben, thanks for joining us. Let's just talk about it. Timberwolves draft, a lot of trades, felt Vikings-ish trading back. What do you think of the first 2 picks for the Timberwolves?
Yeah, so they took Walker Kessler or they traded back from 19, I guess we should talk about first. There were a bunch of guys on the board that, would have potentially made sense if you believed any of the mock drafts that were out there. Some mock drafts even had the Wolves taking Walker Kessler, the 7-footer, 7'1" big man out of Auburn at 19. Mm-hmm. But the Wolves traded back and they picked up 2 picks in the meantime or along the way. They picked up 22 and 29. And then at 22, they picked Walker Kessler from Auburn, and he's 7'1", 7'5" wingspan. He had an insane 90% block rate, which was like the second highest in the last 2 decades in college. He's a rim protector. He's great in pick and roll, drop coverage, which the Wolves ran a lot of, a couple years prior, and karl-Anthony Towns was not great in drop coverage. So they switched their coverages last year. They played a lot of high wall pick and roll, playing at the level of the screen, and blitzing pick and roll coverages, some switching. And Kessler doesn't do those things as well, but he does play drop. And so that suggests to me that 2 things. 1, the Wolves are going to play more drop coverage this year. And 2, they're going to play karl-Anthony Towns at the 4, which I know a lot of folks have been talking about recently as a possibility. I don't think they're going to do it for that many minutes per game. I don't think, Kessler's not going to start at the 5, right? But I mean, you get 12, 14 minutes a game as Towns backup, and maybe you steal 4 to 8 minutes with him next to Towns, depending on matchups. And I understand why the Wolves took Kessler. I know a lot of people feel like he was, could have gone later in the draft. But the Wolves picking him at 22, I know why they did it. It makes sense. It's not a huge shock. But it's maybe not the sexiest pick.
You got Wendell Moore, who's technically a 6'5" forward guard. Is that kind of a sign of going young at the guards, knowing Anthony Edwards is your guy, and then trying to move D'Angelo Russell in that contract?
I mean, I think they're looking for role players. D'Angelo Russell is a high usage guy. He's somebody that obviously wants to be the straw that stirs the drink and also get his own shots. But Anthony Edwards is a higher upside, more dynamic, they're not similar players, but version of that, in the sense that he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, and he's also going to initiate for himself. He's going to create his own shots, and obviously you have karl-Anthony Towns. So the Wolves need lower usage type role players, and that's what I think the direction we're going is both of these guys, Kessler and Moore, are kind of lower, or I should say higher floor, lower ceiling type guys where they're going to play a role. They're not like Jaden McDaniels 2 years ago was drafted in the 20s, and he was a swing, right? He could still be a star, very well could be. He could be the 3rd star if this is going to be a playoff team, a good playoff team in the next couple of years. And I think both Kessler and Moore are going to be more, rotation type guys, potentially starting upside down the road, especially in the case of Moore. But I think they're more likely just kind of role player type guys.
Ben, inevitably, there's going to be a guy. There's going to be a guy that the Wolves passed on, and other teams passed on as well, who's going to make teams feel foolish. Did you have any opinions on who that player might be that you were maybe rooting for the Wolves to take at 19 or even 22?
I don't know about, so with the way the board fell, it actually fell pretty similarly to what I expected. Tari Eason was the guy I really liked that I thought had a chance to be at 19, or maybe the Wolves would trade a second rounder or 2 to go up a couple of spots to get Tari Eason. He went at 17 to the Rockets. So he's the guy in that range. Ochai Agbaji went much higher at 14. He's another guy who I thought had an outside chance of falling. In terms of guys that went around or after the Wolves, so they traded out of 19. They ended up picking up 22 and 29. Malachi Branham went to the Spurs at 20. So one pick after the Wolves traded away from 19. I like Branham quite a bit. I think he's somebody who is a well-rounded type, higher upside player than a Wendell Moore, who they got in the mid-20s at 26. So maybe him. I just don't, I don't know that he'll be that much more impressive. There were some teams that reached for guys that I was surprised went in the first round. That honestly, I like Wendell Moore just as much as you look at the guys drafted between Kessler and him, like him just as much as Marjan Beauchamp, who the Bucks got at 24, and Blake Wesley from Notre Dame, who the Spurs got at 25. Both players that were rumored to be potential Wolves picks. I like Wendell Moore just as much or better. So for me, it's the guys that almost made it to the Wolves, and particularly Tari Eason.
And so when you look at these trades, I mean, honestly, the Vikings fans were like booing from their homes because you could see what Twitter was saying. Do you think, like, when it's all said and done, when the smoke clears, ESPN starts doing their thing, Locked On starts doing their thing, how do you think the fans are going to take to some of these trades when you look at players that are getting missed at the spots that they could have taken them at?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough with the NBA draft, especially. It's so much about, I mean, it's this way in all sports, right? It's all about value and how many. There's the famous NFL draft trade chart, like the points that each pick is assigned, and honestly, if you look at what the Wolves did, they essentially traded. I mean, sitting here right now, they traded the 19 and 3 future second rounders reportedly, and also the 29, which they acquired to get the 22 and the 26, and that doesn't actually look like great value. But if you hit on both of those guys and maybe you're trading those second rounders for additional future picks, then it doesn't matter, right? And Tim Connolly, now running the Timberwolves front office, has done a fantastic job, especially with, his misses were actually lottery type picks early in his tenure in Denver. Most of his hits were, obviously Nikola Jokic in the second round, Monty Morris, their current starting point guard in the second round. More recently, Minnesota native Zeke Naji, late first round, Bones Highland, late first round. Michael Porter Jr. was a bit of a swing, middle first round. He has a really good track record in this area of the draft, and Connolly does. And, it's even year one, right? Like, I mean, there's plenty of guys who weren't very good year one, and by year 2, year 3, they're rotation type guys. I mean, guys that Connolly drafted, Malik Beasley, Juancho Hernan-Gomez were both first round picks by Connolly. They're still NBA rotation guys. They barely played as rookies. You could even talk about superstars like Jimmy Butler barely played as a rookie. So it's going to be really hard to evaluate this fully, unless, of course, like last year, or I guess a couple years ago now, Desmond Bane went with the last pick in the first round. And now he's one of the best 3-point shooters in basketball, was a starter on a really good team, one of the best teams in basketball this year. So there's those guys who could make you regret it pretty quickly. But it's going to take a couple of years, I think, to fully evaluate this. And unless, somebody random in the 20s ends up being Desmond Bane very quickly, I think they're drafting, again, higher floor, lower ceiling type guys that are going to be plug and play on the fringes of the rotation next year.
Last one, Ben.
Yeah.
No trade of D'Angelo Russell on draft night, no blockbusters to speak of. Do you think that increases the likelihood then that Russell is on the roster for the first game of the season?
I think so. I know that there's a lot of folks reporting that it's more likely than not he's traded this offseason. I've maintained at Locked On Wolves, it's certainly possible he gets traded. They're obviously shopping him in a sense, right? They're obviously seeing what they could get for him. I still think the most likely scenario is he's on the roster. And I think it's because they were good last year with him, right? I mean, like, there's obvious reasons why he's not a perfect fit moving forward. I understand the logic of let's trade him now. Well, he's still got a year left on his deal, extension eligible. He's expiring next summer. But you were good with him on the roster. Obviously, he's got rapport with karl-Anthony Towns. They were better with him on the floor than with him off the floor. And also, he is expiring next summer. So, yeah, you'd like to get something for him, but depending on what that something is, why not run it back, add a couple more pieces? And if he leaves next summer, you get the cap space. You could be active next offseason too. So, I think if they find the right situation, absolutely, he could be traded. It's very possible. But especially the fact that, as you mentioned, we got through draft night with no D'Angelo Russell trade. I would put it, this is maybe not the right way to, but I'm thinking like 75% chance he's still on the roster. Maybe it's a 60% chance, something like that. He's on the roster. More likely than not, I think he plays for the Wolves opening night next year. Although, a trade is always possible.
Well, thank you, Ben, for joining us on the Ron Johnson Show. Up next, we got the Daily 3. That's 3 questions, 3 minutes each. Stay tuned for that. Well, we've told you what we think about the draft. We had Ben Beecken on, talked about his thoughts on the Timberwolves. D'Angelo Russell. Make sure you go back and see what he said about D. Russell. Is he going to be on the roster or not? Got to go back and see. But up next, we got the daily 3. That's 3 questions, 3 minutes each. Sam runs the show, so take it away, Sam.
Thank you, Ron. Let's talk about the Twins, a little baseball talk. They played a noon game on Thursday, and they win by the skin of their teeth 1-0. Bullpen comes through at long last, and after an 11-10 slugfest the night before, 1-0 final score. So the Twins salvage a game. They draw back even with the Guardians in the Central. Ron, the series, it was a bizarre series, 3 one-run games, and I think the big takeaway is you should have swept it, so that's disappointing, but it entertained 3 one-run games, and you got 5 more next week. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so they're no games back. They're both even, but when you look at the win-loss, the Guardians are 5-5-4, and the Twins are 5-4-9. So they're giving the edge right now to the Guardians based off win percentage. Now, of course, it doesn't matter because games behind, if they have to have a play or whatever, it's going to come down to the end. But that was the game I talked about. It was key because now you have a 3-game series, and then you got to play them 5 more times. So that win there, I hope that gave their bullpen confidence. 2, their bullpen to realize, you know what? If we pitch this way and our bats are alive, we can win all 5 games next time. Like, that's the 2 things. If they can get those 2 things to work well together, bullpen works well, bats are alive, that's the sound of music. But that's in the Hills if they're alive. But yeah, I think I think the Twins, I'm glad the Twins got one out of that, because if they had lost that one and lost all 3, the sky might be falling on Twitter. Like, the rest of this weekend, it would be a sky's falling situation, because every game after that would start to matter, because now you're like, here we go again. It's about to be the meltdown in Minneapolis. The Twins are going to let it go. And then everybody's going to start focusing on the Vikings. Like, all right, let's get ready for training camp, because we're not going to the playoff. There's no pennant race coming. Well, they're still in it. Like you said, maybe at the trade deadline, they can find some pitcher that's on a team that is trash, but the pitcher's good, and he can come in and help this bullpen out and be a force down the stretch. But, hey, they got the win. That's all that matters. Gives them confidence going into the rest of this next series.
And the Twins play a pretty poor Rockies team at home this weekend. There's a chance to win 2 or 3 games.
Yeah.
I've got another NBA draft question for you. Chet Holmgren does not go to the Magic. Banchero goes to the Magic. Chet goes to the Thunder, who are just racking up the draft picks. I think they had 3 first-rounders.
Yep.
How do you think Chet will fit in with the Thunder?
So the Thunder are under a rebuild. I mean, when you look at the Thunder, and everybody's talking about how good their draft class is from a young pieces standpoint, I think Chet Holmgren does well because he's on a team full of young guys. So you added Chet Holmgren. Jaden Ivey went to the Pistons. That's good for me. Javen Hunter's from Detroit. We're from Detroit, so to see his son go back home. But then you look at the rest of the picks for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They got Dang out of France. So another kid that's going to do well. And then they got Jalen Williams out of Santa Clara. And so they're adding pieces. You added a small forward. You added a small forward, which in today's NBA, it doesn't matter. They play the same position. You could put 2 small forwards on the court because of their size and their length. They're giving them a B+ for one guy, which is Jalen Williams. They're giving them an A- for Dang. And then when you go up to Chet Williams, of course, that's going to be an A+. And so when you look at the grades of this team, that's an A. So to get an A in the first round in any draft is key. But again, it doesn't matter till they bounce the ball and they play together. But I think Chet Holmgren, being a young piece to this puzzle, he's going to have the flexibility to come in and be a star. Like, they're going to want him to be what he is, which is push the ball up the court when you get the rebound. Start the fast break if you need to. But when you're playing the 4, you're going to stretch the floor. We're going to play Warriors ball. We're going to stretch the floor out. Chet Holmgren, where he's going to have to work is if there's a pick and switch, he's going to have to work on his defense, because that's what the Warriors want to do with guys like that. They want to get Steph Curry or Klay Thompson on one of these bigs. And if Chet can figure it out and be able to cover these guys and be strong enough and quick enough, he becomes a force. That pick does not matter anymore. That's where Pablo Banchero, that's why he went 1. You look at what he does, his explosiveness, his strength is 6'9", his ability to guard anybody on the floor. I mean, I'm not going to say he's LeBron, but he has those characteristics, and I think that's why he jumped Chet. His size, his body was already NBA ready, whereas people were going back to the Kevin Durant with Chet as far as how strong can he be. He's not a guard. Kevin Durant's a guard. Chet's not a guard. And so that's where I think the question marks came in for Chet, but he still went number 2. He'll be just fine.
Props to Chet, and I want to give props too to the number 23 pick, David Roddy, who played for Breck. It's super surreal to watch these guys that I watched play in high school here locally in person in the first round of the NBA draft. That's just crazy cool. So hats off to the Minnesota kids. Last one. This is a pretty meaty topic. We might have to pick it up on Monday. Rumor has it you got people going on KFAN over the weekend talking about the top Vikings receivers of all time. I'm curious maybe where you had Justin Jefferson in that list and what were some of the opinions that you were hearing from people?
So, when you talk about all-time anything, if you go tight ends, Kyle Rudolph stands out, but Steve Jordan is going to be the number 1 tight end right now for the Vikings in history. When you talk about running backs, you got Robert Smith, you got Adrian Peterson. Of course, AP is number 1, Robert Smith, and then Dalvin Cook. Does Dalvin Cook jump Robert Smith already? You can't really say that just yet. Robert Smith was a beast. When you talk about receivers, there's no question in anybody's mind that Randy Moss is number 1. Randy Moss is number 1 in the entire NFL, in my opinion. I know Jerry Rice is up there. I know T.O. is up there. But Randy Moss was he was a super freak for a reason. So Randy Moss would be 1. Chris Carter, just because of the longevity, the playmaking ability, the one-handed catches, the toe tap sideline first downs, the personality. Like Chris Carter's personality was built for being mic'd up. For the simple fact is he would spit facts. Like one dude, I remember we played him too when he was older with the Dolphins, but he was a little bit older playing. I think he was playing the Bears, and people probably heard this audio, and the kid said something about like, "Shut up, old man," and Chris Carter was like, "Oh man, you better get on your knees and pray that you can play at my age." Like it's just like super real. Like it wasn't like a man, shut up. It was, dude, you wish you could be my age. Like, oh man, come on. Now I've been doing this for, you want to be where I'm at. Your biggest comeback is old man. And so, that's where I put him too. Now you got Stephon Diggs, you got Adam Thielen, and then you got Justin Jefferson. You got Ahmad Rashad, of course. That's tough. Like, it's tough because Justin Jefferson's only been doing this for 2 years, but he's got 3,000 yards already. In 10 years, if he stays on this, he's at 14 to 15,000 yards. So he's ahead of those guys. Like, that's where but you still can't say he's better than Moss. I saw a tweet today that somebody, and there's an idiot just trying to get, interactions. Justin Jefferson doesn't run great routes. That's what he said. I can't believe he's a top 3 receiver. He doesn't run great routes. Like, shut up. So I'm going to have to kind of preface it by saying Justin Jefferson is probably neck and neck with Stephon Diggs, like in Vikings history, as far as output. If you do the average, not the total, because the total sum, Stephon Diggs is there, Thielen's there, Jefferson would be below. You look at where Thielen's already at, he should be in the Ring of Honor. You look at the receivers that have gone in the Ring of Honor, and Thielen's already better than them as far as statistics go. I would say Justin Jefferson has got to be in that top 5. He's definitely in top 5. Where he falls, I mean, I want people like tweet us, comment on YouTube, tell us what you think. But I'm going to say 3 right now. Like, I might sleep on this and come back Monday and be like, nah, he's not 3. But I went on KFan and I said he was 3. That's why people were kind of like, really ahead of Diggs already, ahead of Thielen. What about Sammy White? What about Ahmad Rashad? Like, I looked at all that. But Justin Jefferson, and maybe I'm a creature and I'm captive of the moment. The gritty has taken me by storm. Like, he's definitely the top celebrator. Like Moss Moon, the Moss, whatever that was. The gritty is definitely the Thielen dead arms dance. Like, the gritty is definitely number 1 there. But I gotta say top 3, top 4. Like Thielen, Jefferson, and Diggs, you can argue those 3 can be 3, 4, 5. You can put them all in there in any order. Some people would say Jefferson, Diggs, Thielen. Some people would say Thielen, Jefferson, Diggs. Some people say Diggs, Jefferson, Thielen. Only time will tell. I don't know. What do you think, Sam?
I think we got to hold this over to Monday. I mean, this is a 40-minute argument right there. I'm not going to say another word. We're going to do this Monday. We're going to hammer this out, and I'm going to come with a list this long of evidence points on why I think what I think. I'm not going to say what I think.
We'll have to do the quarterbacks too. Then we're gonna have to do the quarterbacks at some point. Then too.
It's a slow
Vikings
summer. We got time to kill.
In the history of Vikings, is Kirk Cousins #1 already? That could be a good one. Well, that'll do it for the Ron Johnson Show. I want to thank Ben Beecken. Of course, I want to thank Sam Extra, my producer, as he guides the Ron Johnson Show to the end from start to finish. Great job. We want to thank all those that continue to support us on Locked On Sports Minnesota's YouTube channel, Locked On Sports podcast channel, wherever you get your podcasts. Please make sure you download, share, and listen, and take us with you. Comment as well, interact, tweet us. Sam Ekstrom, Ron Johnson. You can find us on Twitter. I'm not the senator. I'm the football player. He's white. I'm black. It's pretty easy to figure that one out. But I want to thank you guys for joining us, and have a great day.